June 5, 1944, Milton Bryan, Bedfordshire, England. 11:47 p.m. Agnes Burnell sat before her microphone, reviewing the script she would broadcast in 13 minutes. The young Irish actress, using the codename Vicky, had been the voice of Soldaten Sender Calais for 18 months. Tonight's broadcast was different. Tonight she would help deceive 150,000 German soldiers about the location of the largest amphibious invasion in human history. The script contained carefully crafted lies designed to keep an entire army paralyzed while Allied forces stormed beaches 200 miles away. Within 24 hours, her voice, combined with fake radio traffic, phantom armies, and psychological manipulation, would confuse the German 15th Army so thoroughly they would remain frozen at Pas de Calais for 7 weeks. 7 weeks waiting for an invasion that would never come. The stakes transcended military victory or defeat. By June 1944, the outcome of World War II hinged on the success of Operation Overlord. If the Normandy invasion failed, Allied forces would need years to mount another attempt. The Soviet Union, bleeding from 3 years of brutal warfare, might negotiate a separate peace with Germany. Britain, exhausted from 5 years of war, might lose the political will to continue. The Nazi regime, given time to consolidate, might complete development of jet aircraft, V-2 rockets, and potentially atomic weapons. German High Command understood the invasion was imminent. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt commanded Army Group West, 60 divisions spread across France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Over 850,000 troops defended 1,500 miles of Atlantic coastline from Norway to Spain. The question wasn't whether the Allies would invade, but where and when. Every German officer studied the same maps, analyzed the same geography, reached the same conclusions. Adolf Hitler had calculated his answer with absolute certainty. The Pas de Calais would be the primary invasion point. The logic was irrefutable. Calais sat only 21 miles from Dover across the English Channel, the shortest possible crossing. It offered the most direct route to Germany's industrial Ruhr Valley. Allied bombers could provide maximum air cover over the narrow strait. Strategically, geographically, militarily, Calais was the obvious choice. The 15th Army, Germany's strongest formation with 19 divisions and 150,000 men, defended this critical sector. Hitler's logic was sound, his information was accurate, his analysis was professional. His conclusion was completely wrong, and that wrongness had been carefully, methodically engineered by Allied intelligence services over 18 months of deception operations. The seeds of the deception were planted in August 1943. Winston Churchill had established the London Controlling Section, a secret group tasked with strategic deception. Their mission: mislead German High Command about Allied invasion plans. Lieutenant Colonel John Bevan and Colonel David Strangeways developed the framework. They understood a fundamental principle that would govern all their work. The most effective deception reinforces what the enemy already believes. German commanders expected Calais. Allied deception would make them absolutely certain of it. The operation was codenamed Bodyguard, after Churchill's famous quote, "In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." Bodyguard spawned multiple sub-operations, but the most critical was Operation Fortitude. Fortitude split into 2 components. Fortitude North would convince Germans that Allied forces planned to invade Norway from Scotland. The goal was to pin 13 German divisions in Scandinavia, preventing their transfer to France. Fortitude South would convince Germans that the main invasion would strike Pas de Calais, not Normandy. The goal was to paralyze the 15th Army before, during, and after D-Day. The physical deception began in January 1944. In southeastern England, Around Dover and the Thames estuary, the Allies constructed an elaborate theatrical production. The first United States Army group, FUSAG, would be the star. FUSAG existed only as an illusion, but an incredibly detailed one built with meticulous attention to authenticity. Engineers deployed inflatable Sherman tanks across fields in Kent and Essex. Each rubber tank cost approximately $100, compared to $50,000 for an actual Sherman. A team of 4 soldiers could inflate one tank in 30 minutes using compressed air pumps. From ground level, the deception was obvious. These were clearly rubber balloons. From 10,000 feet, through a reconnaissance camera lens, German pilots couldn't distinguish inflatable from steel. The tanks were moved regularly to simulate realistic military activity. Engineers used rollers to create tank tracks in mud and grass. They positioned the inflatable tanks in proper tactical formations, never randomly, always matching actual armored doctrine. Maintenance areas appeared around the fake tanks, complete with tool marks and oil stains. Dummy landing craft filled harbors throughout southeastern England. Constructed from painted canvas stretched over steel frames, each craft cost less than $500. From the air, they appeared identical to the real landing craft gathering in Portsmouth and Plymouth. The dummy fleet numbered in the hundreds, suggesting an invasion force far larger than actually existed. Mock buildings, constructed from wood and canvas, created the appearance of massive supply depots. Fake fuel dumps, empty barrels painted to look full, stretched across dozens of acres. Dummy ammunition stores, deliberately positioned where German reconnaissance could photograph them, suggested enormous stockpiles. Every detail reinforced the illusion of a million-man army preparing to strike Calais. The visual deception required supporting evidence. German intelligence wouldn't rely solely on photographs. They would cross-reference with signals intelligence. Allied radio operators created a symphony of fake transmissions. Thousands of messages flowed between units that existed only on paper. The radio deception followed strict military protocols. Every transmission used authentic codes, proper call signs, realistic encryption. Message volume matched what an actual army group would generate during invasion preparation. Operators maintained radio silence when units were supposedly moving, breaking silence when they arrived at new positions. Weather reports, logistics coordination, tactical planning discussions, all perfectly authentic, all completely false. German listening posts intercepted these transmissions continuously. Intelligence officers plotted them on situation maps. The pattern was unmistakable. A massive force concentrated around Dover, clearly preparing for cross-channel operations. The radio traffic alone would have been convincing evidence. Combined with reconnaissance photographs of tanks and landing craft, it became irrefutable proof. The Phantom Army needed a commander who would convince German intelligence this was the main invasion force. The Allies chose General George S. Patton. Patton's military reputation preceded him. Germans considered him the most dangerous Allied commander. They had studied his campaigns in North Africa and Sicily. They knew his aggressive tactics, his armored warfare expertise, his strategic brilliance. German intelligence assessments concluded, wherever Patton commands, the main attack will occur. Patton's career had nearly ended in August 1943. During the Sicily campaign, he had slapped 2 soldiers in field hospitals, accusing them of cowardice. The incidents became public, creating a scandal that almost destroyed him. General Eisenhower seriously considered court-martial, but Patton was too valuable. His tactical genius was undeniable, and critically, the Germans feared him. So Patton was given a new assignment: command of the fictional FUSAG. He would be the leading man in the greatest deception operation in military history. Throughout spring 1944, Patton appeared publicly in southeastern England. He inspected non-existent troops. He attended ceremonies in Dover. He visited real military installations in Kent. German agents photographed him, reported his presence, confirmed his location. The reports flooded into Berlin. Patton commands FUSAG at Dover. For German intelligence, this single fact proved Calais was the invasion target. They reasoned logically. Eisenhower would never assign his best general to a diversionary force. Therefore, FUSAG must be the main invasion army. Therefore, the attack would come at Calais. The physical and radio deception was supported by human intelligence, or rather, human deception. By 1944, MI5 had achieved something unprecedented in intelligence history. Every single German agent in Britain had been captured or turned. Not most, every single one. The double-cross system, managed by the 20 Committee, XX Committee, 20 in Roman numerals forming a double cross, controlled all German intelligence operations in Britain. Captured German agents faced a choice: work for British intelligence or face execution as spies. Most chose cooperation. These turned agents, now controlled by MI5, fed carefully selected false information to their German handlers. The information was calibrated precisely, accurate enough to maintain credibility, false enough to support the deception. Reports about FUSAG's strength, Patton's activities, invasion preparations at Dover, all flowed from British-controlled agents to German intelligence. The crown jewel of the double-cross system was Juan Pujol Garcia. Garcia was different from the others. He wasn't a captured German agent. He was a Spanish anti-fascist who had volunteered his services to Britain in 1941. Initially rejected by British intelligence, Garcia created his own network of imaginary agents and began feeding fabricated intelligence to German handlers. When MI5 finally recruited him in 1942, they gave him the codename Garbo, after the actress Greta Garbo. Germans knew him as Alaric and considered him their most valuable agent in Britain. Garcia's genius was psychological rather than operational. He understood how to build trust, how to provide intelligence that seemed reluctant or difficult to obtain, how to construct a narrative that felt authentic. Garcia created a fictional network of 27 sub-agents across Britain. None existed. Every report came from his imagination, crafted in consultation with MI5 handlers. His fictional agents included a Venezuelan student in Glasgow, a Welsh fascist in Swansea, a Portuguese businessman in London. Each had distinct personalities, communication styles, and areas of expertise. The Germans paid Garcia substantial sums for his intelligence. They sent him questionnaires requesting specific information. They awarded him the Iron Cross in recognition of his invaluable service. German intelligence trusted Garcia's reports more than their own reconnaissance. Throughout spring 1944, Garcia's fictional agents reported on FUSAG. The Venezuelan student saw American troops with FUSAG shoulder patches in Scotland. The Welsh fascist observed landing craft concentrations in southeastern ports. The Portuguese businessman overheard American officers discussing Patton's upcoming operation. Every report supported the Calais deception. And because Garcia had proven reliable for 2 years, his past intelligence had always been accurate. Because MI5 had carefully ensured it, German intelligence accepted his reports without question. While Fortitude South focused on Calais, Fortitude North targeted Norway. The fictional British Fourth Army supposedly gathered in Scotland. Double agents reported preparations for cold weather operations. Fake radio traffic discussed Norwegian coastal defences, landing zones in Narvik, coordination with Soviet forces. The deception was less elaborate than Fortitude South, but still effective. Hitler kept 13 German divisions in Norway throughout 1944. troops that could have reinforced France. Into this web of physical deception, radio trickery and double agents, Soldatensender Calais was woven as a psychological weapon. The station had been broadcasting since November 14, 1943, from an underground bunker near Crowborough, East Sussex. Sefton Delmer, a British journalist who had grown up in Berlin and spoke German like a native, designed and directed the operation. Soldatensender Calais used the most powerful radio transmitter in the world. The RCA transmitter, codenamed Aspidistra, had been built for an American broadcaster but deemed too powerful under FCC regulations. British intelligence purchased it for $165,000 in 1941. Engineers modified it from 500 kilowatts to 600 kilowatts, enough power to be heard clearly across all of occupied Europe. The transmitter was installed 50 feet underground in a concrete bunker protected by 4 feet of reinforced concrete. 360-foot antenna masts transmitted the signal. The entire complex was camouflaged with fast-growing trees and designed to withstand bombing. From the air, it appeared as unremarkable forest. Aspidistra had a revolutionary capability. It could change frequencies in less than 1 second. Traditional transmitters required hours of manual retuning. This agility allowed Soldatensender Calais to hijack German frequencies when legitimate German stations went off the air during Allied bombing raids. The station claimed to be a German military broadcaster transmitting from Calais. The call sign, Soldatensender Calais, Soldiers Radio Calais, suggested it served German coastal defenders. In reality, every broadcast originated from Milton Bryan, Bedfordshire, 700 miles from Calais. Agnes Burnell, performing as Vicky, became the station's primary announcer in late 1943. The young actress had been recruited from London's theatre scene. Her German was excellent, with neutral accent that wouldn't reveal regional origins. More importantly, she could perform. She could sound authentic, enthusiastic, conspiratorial, whatever the script required. The station's daily schedule ran from 6 p.m. to dawn. Unlike the pre-recorded broadcasts of Gustav Siegfried Eins, Soldatensender Calais transmitted live from purpose-built studios at Milton Bryan. This immediacy was crucial. The station could respond to breaking news within minutes, maintaining its credibility as a real-time military broadcaster. Delmer's formula for Soldatensender Calais was deceptively simple. Cover, cover, dirt, cover, dirt. Play popular German music soldiers wanted to hear, not the marching songs and Wagner that official German radio broadcast endlessly. Provide accurate sports scores that German official radio wouldn't report until the next day. Read genuine news from the German News Bureau, which Delmer's team tapped into daily. Give weather reports that matched what soldiers saw outside their windows. Then, woven through the entertainment, came the dirt. Propaganda disguised as insider information. Warnings about confidence men, swindling soldiers being transferred from France to the Eastern Front. Rumors about foreign workers sleeping with German soldiers' wives while they fought abroad. Reports on Allied bombing raids with specific street addresses destroyed. Information obtained from RAF bomber debriefings before German newspapers reported it. News of Nazi officials hoarding food, black market operations, corruption in the party. The psychological technique was sophisticated. German soldiers knew Soldatensender Calais was probably British. The station occasionally made small errors that revealed its origin. A street name that didn't exist, a reference that didn't quite match German military culture. But they listened anyway. Why did they listen to enemy propaganda? Because it was more honest than German official radio. The music was better. Contemporary jazz and swing that Reich Broadcasting had banned as degenerate. The news seemed more accurate. The station reported German defeats that official channels concealed. The weather information was reliable. The sports scores were timely. Most critically, the station never asked soldiers to defect or betray Germany. It positioned itself as pro-German military, anti-Nazi party. It praised soldiers' courage and sacrifice while condemning officials' incompetence and corruption. This subtle positioning made it psychologically safe to listen. Soldiers could rationalize that they were receiving military information, not consuming enemy propaganda. If the Gestapo questioned them, they could claim they thought it was a genuine German station. The ambiguity provided plausible deniability. This made Soldatensender Calais the most listened-to German-language station in occupied Europe, more popular than official German radio. As D-Day approached, Soldatensender Calais became a critical component of the Fortitude deception. Throughout May 1944, Agnes Burnell's broadcasts carefully mentioned increased Allied activity in southeastern England. She reported on troop movements near Dover, fictitious movements that matched Fusag's supposed activities. She played recordings of Hitler's speeches, maintaining the cover of being a loyal German military station. She discussed military logistics, weather conditions in the Channel, coastal defense preparations. Then, subtly woven into the chatter, came references to the Calais sector. Increased Allied reconnaissance flights over the Pas-de-Calais area. Radio traffic suggesting major operations were imminent. Reports from frontline correspondents about defensive preparations being strengthened. Supply stockpiling in sectors defending Calais. The information was never explicit. Soldatensender Calais never announced, "The invasion will strike Calais." That would have been obvious propaganda, triggering suspicion. Instead, the station provided fragmentary intelligence that listeners assembled into a conclusion. German soldiers and officers heard the reports, connected the dots, and concluded independently that Calais was the target. This psychological technique, leading listeners to reach their own conclusions, was far more effective than direct propaganda. People trust conclusions they reach themselves more than conclusions others try to force upon them. Soldatensender Calais provided the pieces, German intelligence assembled the puzzle. By early June 1944, German forces were primed to expect the invasion at Calais. Reconnaissance showed Fusag at Dover. Radio intercepts confirmed massive Allied communications around southeastern England. Double agents reported Patton was commanding the invasion force. Soldatensender Calais had established the narrative framework. Every piece of information fit the pattern. On June 5, 1944, the deception reached its climax. At 11:47 p.m., Agnes Burnell sat before her microphone with the most important script she would ever read. Sefton Delmer had crafted the words carefully, working with MI5 and military intelligence to calibrate the message precisely. Too much detail would raise suspicion. Too little would fail to reinforce the deception at the critical moment. At midnight, Soldatensender Calais began its broadcast. Agnes Burnell's voice carried across occupied Europe at 600 kilowatts. The script reported unusual Allied activity detected throughout the evening. Radio traffic in southeastern England had increased dramatically. Troop concentrations near Dover showed signs of final pre-invasion preparations. Allied aircraft activity over the Channel had intensified. The broadcast never explicitly stated, "The invasion is coming tonight." Instead, it created an atmosphere of tension and expectation focused on the Calais sector. German coastal defenders, listening to the broadcast, would conclude independently that tonight might be the night, and they would expect the attack at Calais. Simultaneously, Allied aircraft executed the final deceptive operations. Operation Glimmer sent RAF Lancaster bombers toward Boulogne, dropping window, aluminum foil strips that reflected radar signals. 9 bombers flying in precise formation, dropping window in coordinated patterns, created a radar signature indistinguishable from 200 ships. On German radar screens, it appeared as a massive invasion fleet approaching Pas de Calais. Operation Taxable executed the same deception toward Cap d'Antifer, northeast of the actual landing zones. More bombers, more window, another phantom fleet. German radar operators at coastal stations reported to headquarters. 2 large invasion fleets detected, both approaching the Pas de Calais area. Naval commanders scrambled to alert coastal defenses. The 15th Army went to maximum alert. Artillery crews manned their positions. Infantry units moved to defensive positions overlooking beaches. The invasion everyone expected was finally arriving, at Calais, exactly as predicted. At 1:30 a.m. on June 6th, Operation Titanic began its contribution to the deception. RAF aircraft dropped hundreds of dummy parachutists across Normandy and near Calais. The Ruperts, British nickname, or Oscars, American nickname, were life-sized dolls rigged with explosive charges. When they hit the ground, the charges detonated, creating sounds resembling rifle fire and grenades. British Special Air Service teams parachuted alongside the dummies. They carried phonographs that broadcast recorded sounds of soldiers' voices, weapons firing, combat operations. German defenders received reports of massive airborne landings across multiple sectors. Units rushed to engage paratroopers, most of whom were rubber dolls rigged with firecrackers. At dawn on June 6, 156,000 Allied troops began landing on 5 beaches in Normandy: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The landing was 200 miles west of where the 15th Army waited at Calais. German coastal defenders fought fiercely with the forces they had available. The 352nd Infantry Division, positioned at Omaha Beach, inflicted terrible casualties on American forces. But they fought essentially alone, without reinforcements, without support from the powerful 15th Army. In his headquarters, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was in Germany. He had left France on June 4th to visit his wife Lucy for her birthday and to meet Hitler to request more panzer divisions. The weather forecast showed storms in the Channel. No invasion could occur in such conditions. Many other senior German commanders were away from their posts, attending a Kriegsspiel exercise in Rennes. Hitler was asleep at his Berghof retreat in Berchtesgaden. His staff had standing orders never to wake the Führer. When the first reports of landings in Normandy arrived at 6:00 a.m., Hitler's aides faced a dilemma. They decided to wait, letting Hitler sleep while Allied forces poured ashore. Hitler finally woke at noon, 6 hours after the invasion began. By then, conflicting intelligence flooded into German headquarters. Allied forces had landed in Normandy in substantial strength. Thousands of ships, hundreds of aircraft, clearly a major operation. But intelligence also reported continuing Allied activity near Calais. Radio intercepts showed Patton's Fusag still at Dover, apparently still preparing for deployment. Radar contacts indicated fleet movements toward Pas de Calais. Most critically, double-agent reports confirmed Normandy was a diversion. Juan Pujol Garcia, whose intelligence had proven reliable for 3 years, would send the decisive message on June 9th. Hitler reviewed all available information and made his decision. The Normandy landings were a feint, a diversionary attack designed to draw German forces away from Calais. The real invasion, the main assault with Patton's army group, would strike Calais within days. The 15th Army must remain in position. Panzer reserves would not be released to Normandy. German forces would maintain their defensive posture and wait for the actual invasion. This decision, based on months of carefully orchestrated deception, was militarily logical. Hitler had overwhelming evidence supporting his conclusion. Reconnaissance photographs showed Fusag at Dover. radio intercepts confirmed massive Allied communications in southeastern England. Trusted intelligence agents reported the main attack was coming to Calais. Radar showed fleet movements toward Pas de Calais on D-Day night. Soldatenssender Calais had established the narrative framework. On June 9th, 3 days after D-Day, Juan Pujol Garcia sent the message that sealed the deception's success. His telegram to German intelligence reported that his agent network had confirmed the Allied invasion plan. The Normandy operation was indeed a large-scale diversion. Fusag remained fully mobilized at Dover under Patton's command. The main invasion force, significantly larger than the Normandy contingent, would strike Pas-de-Calais within days. German High Command must not weaken the 15th Army by sending reinforcements to Normandy. The message, carefully crafted by Garcia and his Mi-5 handlers, arrived in Berlin at 3 a.m. It woke the duty officer, who immediately alerted senior intelligence officials. They read Garcia's report with mounting alarm and vindication. Their most reliable agent had confirmed what they suspected. Normandy was a deception. Calais was the real target. Hitler read Garcia's decoded message that morning. It confirmed everything he believed. His strategic analysis had been correct all along. The Allies had attempted to deceive him with the Normandy landings, but German intelligence, through agents like Garcia, had penetrated Allied plans and discovered the truth. Hitler issued explicit orders. The 15th Army would remain at Pas-de-Calais indefinitely. Panzer divisions that had begun moving toward Normandy were recalled immediately. The 1st SS Panzer Division, already en route, stopped its movement and returned to defensive positions. Elements of the 116th Panzer Division received countermanding orders. 150,000 German soldiers stayed frozen at Calais, manning defenses against an invasion that would never come. Throughout June and into July, the deception continued with meticulous attention to detail. Soldatenssender Calais maintained its reports of Fusag activity and preparations. Fake radio traffic showed Patton's army group conducting final training exercises and preparing for deployment. RAF reconnaissance flights over Pas-de-Calais outnumbered flights over Normandy 2-1, reinforcing the impression that Calais remained the priority target. Allied bombers struck targets around Calais more heavily than around Normandy. The visual deception continued. Inflatable tanks were regularly repositioned in southeastern England, photographed by German reconnaissance. New fake installations appeared, suggesting Fusag was receiving reinforcements. Shoulder patches for fictional Fusag divisions appeared on real soldiers walking through Dover and surrounding towns. The cumulative effect was a seamless, multi-layered deception that operated on every level of intelligence collection. Whatever method German intelligence used to gather information, they found evidence supporting the Calais invasion. Photographic reconnaissance showed Fusag tanks and installations. Signals intelligence intercepted Fusag radio communications. Human intelligence from double agents confirmed Fusag's existence and readiness. Radar detected phantom fleets approaching Calais. Propaganda broadcasts established the psychological framework. German intelligence analysts, despite their training and professionalism, never questioned the fundamental assumption. They analyzed evidence meticulously, cross-referenced sources, validated information. But every source, every method, every analysis pointed to the same conclusion. They never realized that every piece of evidence had been carefully placed there by Allied deception teams. The cost to Germany was catastrophic and measurable. Allied forces in Normandy faced fierce resistance but manageable numbers. D-Day casualties for the Allies totaled approximately 10,000 killed, wounded, or missing across all 5 beaches. These numbers, while tragic, were far below the 30,000 to 75,000 casualties Allied planners had feared. German casualties told the story of the deception's success. Without reinforcements from the 15th Army, Normandy defenders were systematically destroyed. By June 30th, German casualties exceeded 47,000, nearly 5 times Allied losses. The 352nd Infantry Division at Omaha Beach, which had inflicted heavy casualties on D-Day, was ground down to 20% effectiveness within 2 weeks. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend entered battle on June 7th with 20,540 men and 177 tanks. By August, the division had been reduced to 300 effective soldiers and 10 operational tanks. This represented a 98.5% casualty rate. The division was functionally annihilated. The Panzer Lehr Division, considered one of Germany's elite armoured formations, lost 5,000 men and most of its tanks by June 15th. The 21st Panzer Division was reduced from 146 tanks to 30 by mid-July. Division after division was destroyed, while the 15th Army, 19 divisions strong, remained at Calais. The decisive moment came on July 25, 1944, 7 weeks after D-Day. Hitler finally, reluctantly, accepted that no second invasion was coming to Calais. Allied forces had established an unbreakable position in Normandy. The beachhead extended 50 miles inland. Over 850,000 Allied troops and 150,000 vehicles had landed. The fiction could no longer be maintained. Hitler ordered the 15th Army to move to Normandy. But 7 weeks was far too late. Allied forces were already breaking out of the Normandy hedgerows. Operation Cobra, launched July 25th, punched through German lines. American armored divisions raced across France. The 15th Army marched toward Normandy and straight into the Falaise Pocket encirclement. Eisenhower had asked MI5 for one thing before D-Day: just keep the 15th Army out of my hair for 2 days. That's all I ask. MI5, through Soldatensender Calais, fake radio traffic, double agents, phantom armies, and psychological manipulation, delivered 7 weeks. Those 7 weeks changed the course of the war. Post-war interrogations revealed the depth and completeness of the deception. General Hans Speidel, Rommel's chief of staff, acknowledged that German command believed Normandy was a feint until mid-July. Field Marshal von Rundstedt admitted in Allied captivity that he had been completely deceived about invasion plans. German intelligence officers, when shown the extent of the Phantom Fusag operation, expressed disbelief that they had been so thoroughly manipulated. The transcripts of these interrogations are remarkable documents. Professional intelligence officers, trained in analysis and skepticism, describing how every indicator pointed to Calais. They had done their jobs competently, analyzed evidence professionally, reached conclusions logically. They were systematically, completely wrong because the evidence itself had been fabricated. One German radar operator, captured in August 1944, described watching the Phantom fleet approach Pas de Calais on D-Day night. The radar contacts were clear, unambiguous, exactly matching what an invasion fleet would produce. He had reported it immediately to headquarters. He never imagined that RAF bombers dropping aluminum foil could create such convincing false returns. A signals intelligence officer described intercepting thousands of Allied radio messages between Fusag units throughout spring 1944. The traffic volume, encryption patterns, message content, all perfectly matched what a real army group would generate. He had plotted unit locations, tracked movements, built a complete order of battle for Fusag. None of it existed outside Allied transmitters and his own reports. German agents who had reported on Fusag were interrogated after the war. Many insisted they had personally observed American troops with Fusag shoulder patches. They had seen the tanks, the landing craft, the installations. The truth that MI5 had controlled them, that everything they observed had been carefully staged, shattered their confidence in their own perceptions. Juan Pujol Garcia's deception was revealed after the war, and German intelligence officials who had trusted him expressed profound shock. They had paid him substantial sums, awarded him the Iron Cross, relied on his intelligence for critical decisions. His fictional network of 27 agents had seemed so authentic, so detailed, so reliable. Learning that Garcia had been working for the British all along, that every report had been fabricated, was a devastating blow to their professional pride. The human cost of keeping the 15th Army at Calais is impossible to calculate exactly, but the arithmetic of war offers rough estimates. Each of the 19 divisions of the 15th Army contained approximately 8,000, 12,000 men. If even half the 15th Army had reinforced Normandy in the first week, German forces would have outnumbered Allied forces significantly during the critical beachhead consolidation phase. Allied planners estimated that fighting through heavily reinforced defences would have resulted in 50–100% higher casualties. The 10,000 Allied casualties on D-Day might have been 15,000–20,000. The campaign to break out of Normandy might have taken months instead of weeks. Tens of thousands of additional Allied soldiers might have died. Tens of thousands of additional French civilians might have been killed in prolonged combat operations. These numbers are estimates, but they represent real lives. Every day the 15th Army remained at Calais was a day Allied forces strengthened their position with reduced casualties. Every panzer division that didn't reinforce Normandy was a division that didn't inflict casualties on Allied soldiers. Every week of delay was a week closer to Allied victory. The effectiveness of Soldatensender Calais within this larger deception operation cannot be precisely measured. The station was one instrument in an orchestra of deception, but it was a critical instrument, providing the psychological framework through which German soldiers and officers interpreted other intelligence. When German troops heard reports of FUSAG activity, Soldatensender Calais had primed them to expect it. When they intercepted radio traffic about Patton's army group, the station had already established Patton's presence at Dover as common knowledge. When double agents reported invasion preparations, the broadcasts had created the narrative structure that made those reports believable. The station's 18-month track record of accuracy on non-strategic matters built trust. Sports scores were always correct. Weather reports matched reality. News about bombing raids was accurate because it came from RAF debriefings. This foundation of truth made the strategic lies about FUSAG and the invasion believable. On April 30, 1945, one day before Hitler's suicide in his Berlin bunker, Soldatensender Calais made its final broadcast. Agnes Bernell read her last script without fanfare, explanation, or acknowledgement. The station that had operated for 18 months, transmitted millions of words, and helped deceive an entire army simply went silent. The war in Europe had 5 more days to run, but the deception operations were over. The infrastructure survived. Aspidistra continued operating until September 28, 1982, broadcasting BBC external services to Europe. Harold Robin, the engineer who had purchased and installed the transmitter in 1942, had the honor of pressing the off switch for the final time, exactly 40 years after he'd turned it on. The underground bunker at Crowborough was gutted in the 1980s and converted to a regional government headquarters for nuclear war contingency. Today, Sussex police use the site for training. The 360-foot antenna masts were dismantled decades ago. The forest has reclaimed the land. Agnes Bernell returned to her acting and singing career. She rarely discussed her wartime role. The Official Secrets Act bound her to silence about specifics. In interviews late in her life, she described the surreal experience of sitting in a rural English studio, pretending to broadcast from occupied France. She knew hundreds of thousands of German soldiers were listening to her voice. She knew her scripts were designed to manipulate their perceptions, to shape their understanding of reality. The psychological weight of that responsibility, she said, was sometimes overwhelming. Sefton Delmer maintained silence about his role until 1962. Churchill had urged secrecy, worried that revealing the extent of Allied deception would allow Germans to claim they'd been stabbed in the back by propaganda rather than defeated on the battlefield. Only with the publication of his memoir, Black Boomerang, did Delmer reveal the full story of the political warfare executive's operations. The book caused a minor sensation in intelligence communities. The sophisticated psychological techniques Delmer described were immediately adopted by Cold War intelligence services. The principles of black propaganda, information that appears to come from the enemy, became standard practice. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and other Cold War broadcasting operations all drew on lessons learned from Soldatensender Calais. The lessons of this operation remain relevant in the age of information warfare. Modern psychological operations employ the same core principles: reinforce existing beliefs, provide authentic-seeming information, shape the framework through which people interpret new information, use multiple channels to create the appearance of independent confirmation. The technology has evolved. Social media platforms have replaced radio transmitters. Deepfake videos have replaced rubber tanks. Bot networks have replaced double agents. But the psychology remains unchanged. Humans are pattern recognition machines. We seek information that confirms our existing beliefs and discount information that contradicts them. We trust conclusions we reach independently more than conclusions others try to force upon us. We believe information more readily when it comes from multiple seemingly independent sources. These cognitive biases are hardwired into human psychology. The story of how one fake news broadcast confused an entire Nazi division is ultimately about the power of coordinated deception. Soldatensender Calais alone didn't keep the 15th Army at Calais. Fake radio traffic alone didn't convince Hitler that Normandy was a feint. Inflatable tanks alone didn't create Fusag. Double agents alone didn't establish the invasion narrative. But combined, coordinated, mutually reinforcing, these deceptions created an alternative reality so convincing that professional intelligence officers accepted it completely. 150,000 German soldiers remained at Pas de Calais for 7 weeks after D-Day because they believed a lie delivered through every available channel. Every method they used to verify information, reconnaissance, signals intelligence, human intelligence, radar, confirmed the lie because Allied deception teams had corrupted every channel. In the final analysis, Operation Fortitude and Soldatensender Calais represent the most successful strategic deception in military history. They achieved their objectives beyond the most optimistic projections. They saved thousands of Allied lives. They shortened the war in Western Europe by months. They demonstrated that psychological warfare, executed with sufficient sophistication, can be as decisive as any physical weapon. Agnes Burnell's voice, transmitted at 600 kilowatts from an underground bunker in Sussex, was one instrument in this orchestra of deception. But it was a critical instrument, playing exactly the right notes at exactly the right moments. Her fake news broadcasts didn't single-handedly confuse the German 15th Army. They were part of a masterpiece of coordinated psychological manipulation that changed the course of history. The Allies bought 7 weeks with illusions, lies, and the systematic corruption of every intelligence channel Germany possessed. Those 7 weeks cost Germany the war in the West and helped liberate Europe from Nazi tyranny. One fake broadcast among many, one lie among thousands, one voice in a chorus of deception. But together they confused an entire army and changed the world, 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 and changed the world.